Okay, this is week 55. This is Gardening with William DeMille. This is where we do our Thursday night Q&A. I help you have the best garden of your entire life. We discuss gardening, farming, livestock, the Georgic tradition, soil health, education. The purpose of this is to help you have the very best garden by fixing your soil health so that you can have human health from the ground up. We are going to be talking about some questions that I got, and I will be answering those tonight. If you have questions and you're on live, you can ask those now. If you're not on live and you're watching the recording, you can go to my website and send me your questions through my contact info there. And the website is www.georgicrevolution.com. The questions here, we're going to jump right into this and get going. And the question is, do I have a crop rotation chart? No, I don't, because crop rotation is becoming a thing of the past. Crop rotation is still important if you have a non-functioning soil. And there are so many crop rotation charts that are available on the internet and in almost every gardening book out there that I did not put one in my book, because my book is all about the new science and the brand new information that we have been learning in the last few short decades. So I did not put in information that is now obsolete if you have a functioning soil. So the best way to get away from crop rotation and to get away from fertilizers, to get away from pesticides and herbicides, is to create a functioning soil by incorporating the soil health principles into your management plan. And so that is what is in my book, is how to do these new things that we have learned, which is interesting because this is the way people were farming 100 years ago, before Norman Borlaug's great adventure and invention of the Green Revolution, which has nothing to do with green politics. But they both have the word green in there, so people get confused. So no, I don't have a crop rotation chart, because within a few short years or seasons, you don't need one. And the crop rotation charts on the internet are pretty good. But I'll just answer that real quick. If you're needing to rotate crops, because I have land that's not functioning soil, so I do rotate crops. I do rotate crops on those soils until the soils function. So what you're rotating are the plant families. So if you're growing potatoes, then you go to Google and you type in what plant family is a potato in. It will pop up and say the nightshade family. And then you know to plant it where you did not have nightshades last year. So that would include peppers, tomatoes, eggplants, tomatillos, things like that. So it's pretty simple to figure out your crop rotation chart that way. The other thing that I want to say about crop rotation is it is important to have a massive amount of diversity. You want to grow your garden like a jungle. Just mix everything up instead of traditional long straight rows that are where you have specific crops. Just mix it all up, and then you are creating a massive amount of diversity, which will help your plants be healthier this year, even if you don't have a functioning soil yet. So start planting lettuce and tomatoes and carrots and onions very close to each other. And that will help you in your gardening. It will help you have disease resistance, pest resistance, and it will help your plants to grow healthier and bigger and stronger and more tasty. And then the question about Sevin. Sevin is a brand name of a pesticide dust. And I don't use Sevin. I've never used Sevin in my life. I've known a lot of people who have, but it's one of these man-made inputs that probably has a bad effects on the microbiome in the soil. Now, I don't know if it does or not, but most of the man-made products that will kill bugs that you can see will also kill the microbiology, and we want as much microbiology as possible. In fact, we want as many bugs as possible. We want all of the groups of there's eight very important groups that we need. So I'll just name them real quick. There are the bacteria, fungus, protozoa, nematodes, microarthropods, macroarthropods, incatriids, and earthworms. And we want as many of those as possible in our gardens. Even the bad bugs, you want a lot of pests in there because those are your decomposers. Now, if you're trying to grow some food and the pests are eating your plants, that's an ecological indication that your plants are not healthy because your soil is not healthy. So work on your soil health. So that could sound really sad if you're trying to grow a plant and it's being eaten. So what do you do right now if it's being eaten? Well, for this year, you can use nets to keep bugs off. You can, maybe you will need to use a pesticide to get some of them off. But over the course of the next 3 to 5 years, focus on your soil so that your soil is so incredibly healthy that your plants' protein and sugar levels are so high that your crops become toxic to the pest when it bites your plant, and then they won't eat your plant. So that's what we want to do for pesticide control. And then about Three Sisters, I had a question about how to plant a Three Sisters garden. So Three Sisters is where you plant corn, and then a legume like green beans or peas, and then you have a cucurbit like melons or cucumbers or squashes in your garden, and you grow them all together. And so that's a great thing to do, but how do you actually plant it? Because some people struggle and say, well, it doesn't work because the squash gets so big, my corn doesn't grow. Well, so this is interesting that this is not more common knowledge that I'm going to tell you right now. You want to let your corn grow up until it's at the 3-leaf stage. So it has 3 leaves. So it's going to be about 6 inches tall before you start planting anything else in there. So your corn grows for 3 or 4 weeks, and it's not timing, it's how many leaves are on there, because if it's cool weather, then it will be growing for a longer amount of time. So you can't really go by the calendar. You have to go out there and look at the number of leaves on your corn. And then when you get nice tall corn, around 6 inches high, and it has 3 full complete leaves on there, then that is when you plant all of your other stuff. And then there's a question about mulch or a detritus sphere on your garden. How much do you put on and when do you add it? You can add detritus sphere any day of the year. So we have 365 days of the year. Pick one of them and put your detritus sphere out there. And so that would be things that you want to add to the soil surface. The best thing to add is a finished compost, and it's best if you sift it a little bit so that you don't have great big chunks. Because if you have giant chunks of wood chips, they can get in your way when you're maybe moving plants around. Like if you're doing anything like weeding, it can get in your way of your hoe, and then you think you're not you're not going to hit your plant with the hoe, but then you hit a wood chip and the wood chip's half buried and then it knocks your plant over. So big wood chips can be a problem. So you want to try to avoid wood chips the best you can. That is a good idea. But some people just have wood chips everywhere on their gardens, and that works out fine too. So it just comes down to a general preference of what do you want to do. So you just have to choose that. So anybody on live tonight, you can go ahead and ask a question and I will answer it. I do have one question here in the chat. It says, what do you do for strawberries with yellowing leaves? Yellow leaves is either too much water, not enough nitrogen, or not enough iron. And with strawberries, they are notorious for not having enough iron. So you probably, without seeing your strawberry plant, it's kind of hard to tell for sure. But lots of strawberries, especially in northern Utah soils, and I know that's where you're from, that would a lot of those soils are not deficient in iron. And so what you need to do for this year is pop down to a garden center and get some fertilizer that has some iron in it. And so you would just go to a garden center and look for some type of a high iron fertilizer. I would not go to a Walmart or a Home Depot or a Lowe's garden center, because those places, there's nobody there to help you. You need to go somewhere like a mom and pop nursery. So I'm not sure how far away you are from like the Orem Lehigh area, but there's a place just off the interstate there in Lehigh, I think, called Cook's Nursery. It's by the Harley Davidson place, just right off the freeway. And if you walked in there and asked those people, any employee there will know what to do for strawberries with yellow leaves, and tell them you suspect it's an iron deficiency. And then they will walk over there to the shelf. They'll grab some bottle and hand it to you. Just make sure that you follow the instructions on those things that you put in the soil. It's very important, especially with the metals that plants need, that you follow the instructions, because if you put too much on, it'll kill everything and nothing will grow for a few years. So don't put on too much of these inputs into the soil. So that's the quick fix for this year. In the long run, and I know you have new garden beds that you've just built, so they're not functioning yet, but in the long run, you need to be getting 2 or 3 inches of good detritus on the top of the soils every year, so that you are focusing on that detritus being fed to the microbes. The microbes are going to decompose that. And then when you get enough fungus and good bacteria in the soil, they will be melting down the sand, silts, and clays and be getting the iron out of the soils to feed your plants. But that takes a while. So go ahead and get a little bit of fertilizer and put on your plants so that you can have strawberries this year. That's the answer for right now. Okay. That is good. Let me just go through this real quick. Here are the ways that I help you grow food. And I just want to make sure that everybody knows that boot camp is coming up in August. We already have people signing up. Get signed up for boot camp. We will be here on site in northern Nevada, in my greenhouse, in my gardens, learning how to grow the best food ever. Come to our 3-day boot camp. It is happening now. The other fun thing is my book is ready. If you haven't got my book yet, get it quick so that you can start regenerating your soils. You want your soils to get regenerated. You want them to become the best soils ever, so that you don't have to rely on a garden center for fertilizers and inputs. Okay, I have another question here. What do you think of taking good soil from a functioning bed to add to one that needs help? That's a good idea, and that would just be adding an inoculant. So you would, inoculate means to introduce. So if you took some soil and scattered it over another soil, another bed, that would get the good microbes that are already doing their thing in a functioning soil, and it would add them to the non-functioning soil and get those microbes in there. That would be a fantastic good thing to do. That's the entire idea of making a proper compost. So in a compost, the microbes would be much more condensed, more, there's more of them. In a gallon of water, you're gonna have a lot more than you'd have in a gallon of from your bed that is functioning. But that's a good idea. In fact, it's a great idea. So that's a good thing. In fact, sometimes we will inoculate our compost to get them started with a pinch of the fungus that we find in forests that are near our home in our area, because the fungus have been growing in those soils for a long time, maybe 1,000 years. And so we can get those into our garden beds around our homes where we are. So that is a good idea to do that for sure. If you need any help with your with your soils, I can do soil tests for you. If you need consulting help, I can help you with that. If you are a person who can get away for 4 months, next year's 17-week boot camp that we do here on site, we already have people signing up for that. So you could come and you could get into that class for next year. So we do have a waiting list that is happening for sure. So another question, we have stinky compost tea made from weeds. It smells like manure, a cow manure pile. Okay, you don't want to use that. Anytime that you have a bad smell coming from any kind of a compost, that means that it is anaerobic. The reason manure smells bad is because it's anaerobic. And you always have good organisms in aerobic soils and teas. So, and they never smell bad. So just being able to smell the compost extracts, the compost teas, and those types of things that we put on our garden, the smelling test is the best thing you can do. If it has any odor at all, you might be in trouble, okay? Now, if it has a bad odor, you are probably in trouble. You'd never want to use those on your garden. But if it smells sweet and good like a forest floor, those are usually okay. But the best composts there are have no odor at all. You can't really smell anything. And that's what you want in your gardens. That's exactly what you're looking for. Okay, so if it's smelling like cow manure, don't use it. You need to continue to compost it properly. Now, people often will call me or text me and say, my compost smells really bad, and you said it wouldn't smell bad if I'm doing it right. And then I say, how old is it? And they say, 1 week. Well, it always smells bad in the first few weeks. It's when it's 6 months old and it has matured and it's finished. That's when it has no odor. So almost all composts of any method you're using will smell pretty bad in the very first stages. So that's an important key to remember. All right, so that is pretty much the end of what we were going to talk about tonight. If you have any more questions, you can ask them now. You can unmute and ask, or you can type it in the chat. Whatever you want. If we have no more questions, we will go ahead and wrap it up for tonight.
Unmute. Are we unmuted? Hi.
Yes, I can hear you, Melanie.
Okay. It was the compost tea. What I did was I put fresh weed tops, dandelion greens, the tops of white, what's it called? It's a white flowering invasive weed here. It's really bad. White top. It
sounds like perennial pepperweed.
White top. And it wasn't in bloom. It was not in bloom. It was just the weed that we dug up. And that's what I made this stinky stuff out of, was from the water and these weeds, not a compost tea per se. But you're saying then I should not use it because it does smell.
Well, the things that make this bad smells are anaerobic organisms. And many, not all, but many anaerobic organisms are the disease-causing organisms that will make plants sick and die, that will make animals sick and die, and that make humans sick and die. So it's better if you don't use it if it has a pretty bad smell. I mean, did you mix it up fresh, or has it been sitting for a while?
It's been sitting for a while now.
Yeah, if it's been sitting for a while, then, because even in 24 hours, those disease-causing organisms can grow and multiply, and you can have high enough levels to kill stuff. So you probably shouldn't use it.
Well, then my next question is, when you make a compost tea, how many days does it take then? Well, not a tea. The tea not coming from the compost. The tea is coming from weeds or, green refuse in your yard. And how many days should it sit then until it's ready? And then what is the ratio for diluting that onto the garden?
So I've never made anything like that, so I have no idea. I always compost everything first, and then it matures so that it has no odor at all. And that's when I use those types of products. The only thing that I would use that's fresh is I put alfalfa in a blender with water, and I will mix that up really good. And then I will strain it out and I will spray that directly on plants, but you do it immediately. You wouldn't let that sit at all. So I don't know where you heard that recipe or found that. I'm not saying it doesn't work. I'm just saying if you're letting it ferment for a while, there's a really good chance you're growing all kinds of nasty disease-causing organisms in it. And so it's probably not a good thing to use.
Wow, I wonder where we dump it then. That's going to be a problem. Where do we dump it?
We'll go over to Nevada and dump it over
Oh, we'll
there.
dump it in Nevada. No, we're not going to. Okay, and then when you have a compost tea, then William, what's the dilution ratio for that? You know, you've got that nice compost that you put in water and it's made a tea. Do you just use it straight, like in a 5-gallon bucket, or?
Yeah, so what you're explaining is a compost extract, and that's a very different animal than a compost tea. So a compost extract is you get your finished compost, you would take a softball size amount, so 3 or 4 cups, and you would mix that with a 5-gallon bucket, and you mix it a lot, like for 2 or 3 minutes. And so that's a lot of stirring to actually do it that long. And then you just water your plants with it. And it's mainly for the soil, to get the microbes into the soil. If you want to put it on the leaves, that's where you would make what we call a tea. And that is a brewing process where we would have an air bubbler, like a fish tank bubbler, and it would boil that and bubble it for 24 hours. But you're pulling samples out of that brew every hour for 24 hours. And you have to analyze it under a microscope to make sure you don't have to make adjustments while that's happening, because it's very common, even though you're pumping it full of oxygen, it's common that it can go anaerobic, because there can be stages in there when the microbes are they are reproducing so rapidly during that process that they can use more oxygen than you can physically pump in, even with a great big air blower. So, but the reason you would go to that much trouble and stay up all night with a microscope for 24 hours is if you had trees that were dying, and it will make the microbes the perfect consistency to spray on the leaves of the trees, and that would save the trees. So, I mean, it's a very rare that people actually make and use a tea, but I just wanted to point that out, because what you're actually talking about is an extract, which is super easy to make. You just mix some up in a 5-gallon bucket and you pour it on around your soil on the plants.
Thank you.
Okay, any more questions?
Plant around with potatoes.
Here's a question. What would we plant around potatoes?
So your potatoes are going to get pretty big, so don't plant them very close, or whatever you're planting around them will get shaded by the potato plants. But you can plant anything. If you're going for different plant families, then don't plant tomatoes, eggplants, tomatillos, or peppers near your potatoes, because not that it'll be bad for them, it just won't help them grow. You want to have plants in completely different families growing together. So you could plant lettuce and onions and peas. Those would be good things to plant near your potatoes.
I've got another question, William. It's
Okay.
getting not today, but it is getting warm now, and so I'm guessing that peas aren't going to grow very well. So, and how many beans do we want? You know, we've got a lot of melons that we bought and a lot of, what else did we buy? A lot of,
And our corn is not three
Yeah.
beans high.
yeah. So we have a lot of transplants that we are doing, and so they're getting bigger. They need to go in the ground. Just wondering, what can we plant around all these melons that we have now?
Yeah, anything that's not in the cucurbit family, because melons are cucurbits. So
Yes.
carrots, any legumes like beans or peas. You could plant favas. You could plant anything you want.
Okay.
Just avoid the other cucurbit family. So since you have melons, then avoid squashes and cucumbers near them. Here again, it won't hurt them. It's not bad for them. It's just not going to benefit them.
Okay, and so we have this huge garden now, so just put them everywhere. Just plant the melons everywhere and things in between.
Just mix it all up. Yes, that's the easiest way. Instead of getting out a chart and getting worried about which is which, just mix it all up like a jungle. That's the easiest way to do it, and they generally do pretty good that way. As long as you don't have a plant that's shading another plant. So if you really want to make sure that you have a good carrot crop, don't plant a whole bunch of big squashes right on top of them, because the carrots need lots of light. So you don't want them to be shaded. So you have to have plenty of space between the plants.
Oh, peas are turning yellow. Pea leaves I noticed tonight too are also turning yellow, and they're not growing very well. Suggestions?
Yeah, have you been getting a lot of rain over there?
Yes,
No,
And have the nights been cold?
yes.
not really. No, the last 2 nights they have been, but these peas aren't any more than, they're not even a foot tall. And they were planted a while ago.
They probably need a good shot of nitrogen.
Okay,
What kind of fertilizer are you using?
what did we use?
I don't know that we used any, we put bone meal.
Yeah, bone meal has no nitrogen in it. You need to get some, just some fish emulsion. Go to the Intermountain Farmer has a product called fish hydrolysate, and it will have nitrogen in it. And it comes in a gallon jug, and you mix, probably, you need to follow the directions, but it's probably a tablespoon in a gallon of water. And then water all your plants with that. And give them a shot of that probably every 2 weeks for the next month or so.
The fish fertilizer is not the same thing as the fish hydrolysis then, is it?
Yes, fish hydrolysate is fertilizer.
Oh, okay, so what we have in the gallon jug down there will probably work then.
And you can read the label and see if it has nitrogen in it, whatever you have. Yellowing leaves in legumes is usually a nitrogen deficiency.
Would that be the same thing as the strawberries then?
No, because strawberries are more susceptible to iron deficiencies.
All right.
But from a soil health perspective, this is just telling us that your soil is not functioning, which we already knew, because no soil functions until you work on it for 3 or 4 or 5 years. And then it'll finally get to the point that I'm always screaming about. So it'll come along. Just keep your ground covered. Get lots of leaves and grass clippings and wood chips and mulches on the top of your soil around your plants. And when your plants get big in another month and a half from now, go in there with a bunch of detritus and get that up around all your plants so it's like 5 inches thick.
The other question is, what do you suggest to keep birds out of the strawberries?
Are they actually eating your strawberries already?
They're going to be. They did last year.
A net. You need a net.
Okay.
There's a product called tulle fabric.
I'll get the tool. Then what about fertilizer? What about The bees then. The bees coming in.
You don't need bees to pollinate strawberries. They'll pollinate in the wind.
Okay, and the same thing, we planted beans among them, and onions are also among the
They'll pollinate without bees too.
Okay,
So get it covered with a net and that'll keep the birds out.
that's good. And we do have tulle as well. Okay.
Good.
Is that your actual yard behind you or a photo? It sure is nice.
Now that's our front yard.
Yeah, it's
There you
beautiful.
go. That's our front yard last summer. So that picture was taken a year ago.
Very nice.
It is lovely.
Thank you. Okay, fantastic. Hopefully this helps you, and we will see you next week.
Thank you very much.
Thank
You're-
you so much.
You're welcome. Good night.